wanted to hop on really quickly and just cover what I mentioned in the group earlier, which is all about the only 5 things that people ultimately purchase inside of any problem that they're trying to solve. And I heard this originally from Travis Sago, and then again from someone named Nick Peterson, who both I've just learned a lot about the psychology of content creation and marketing and positioning and all those sorts of things. So if you want to go back into a little more detail around these things, in the Content to Customers version 2.0 workshop, I dove deep into them and covered 5 reasons people will take action and the only 5 things that people ultimately buy. But I wanted to jump back into them really quickly. So just as a refresher, and this is always good for me too, to get a reminder of these things inside of our content. When we're creating it, we should really be looking through this lens. And then obviously in this training, I talked about the different trust lenses, which are ways that you can approach creating the content, because there's 4 general categories of people: those who like stories, those who like actionable steps to follow, those who like connecting with the state of being human and understanding the why behind what we do as human beings, and those who like the data, which is analytical. But then inside of that, there's really only 5 reasons that people will take action and do anything, right? So when we want to get someone to take action, it's really effective to focus on at least one of these categories, if not a couple of them, and understand that if we don't cover them over this sequence of the sales cycle, or taking someone from being a prospect to ultimately wanting to buy, if we don't cover one of these things, that's where we tend to get objections. That's where we tend to have a lot of question marks come up. And that's where we have trouble actually getting people off the fence to say yes, commit. So 5 reasons that people ultimately take action with you and jump into anything that you're doing. Number 1 is relative advantage. So is it better than what I'm currently doing? That one's pretty straightforward, right? You need to explain your unique mechanism and why it's better. And that's why so many people in marketing, this again is understanding the why behind what people do. So this is why everyone talks about having a unique mechanism, because it answers this question here, right? Is this better than what I'm currently doing? And when it's unique and new, it's easy to understand or position as being better. That's why we want to have a unique mechanism that makes our marketing a little bit easier. Then the other thing, and this kind of goes into unique mechanism, which is why you can't just make something up out of nowhere. So an extreme example of this is like Elon Musk has a lot of different companies, but Tesla, the uniqueness of Tesla was a fully electric car for kind of the first time that became mainstream for most people to have, right? Not that far off. We had electric cars before, just in his way with his unique design, positioning as a really high quality luxury electric car that performed really, really well. That was unique. That was different from what anybody else was doing or was out on the market at that time. But an electric car was not so far off that it made people think that it was too complex. It wasn't doable. It was too complicated. That's where, like, for him, SpaceX and going to Mars, too far off for most people. So he can't go out and sell rocket ships, right? Because that's something that's way beyond the capacity for most people to even believe is potentially possible. He believes it's possible, and he's kind of that crazy outlandish thinker. But that's where you can't be too out there with the name of your unique mechanism or what it is, because if people don't understand it, if they think it's too complicated and they don't think they're smart enough to actually succeed inside of doing that thing, you're going to have a hard time getting them to take action. The compatibility process, this aligns with one of the reasons that people buy, which is identity. And it's just saying, like, does this align with my identity? So an example of this, like an extreme example, would be if you are a vegan and for whatever reason you believe in that. And so identity wise, you identify as a vegan. And if I tried to offer you a unique mechanism that involved eating, consuming, using animal products it just wouldn't work, right? Because that would not be compatible with your identity, with who you are. Similarly, right, other ideas around this is like if you're a parent, right? You want to identify as being a better parent. So if I position an opportunity that you think takes you away from being a good parent, it will be out of alignment with who you want to be. And there, henceforth, you won't take action on it. The trial ability, pretty straightforward, but can someone try what it is that you offer? And this is the value in having lower ticket offers, right? That's why it's sometimes hard to go from completely free all the way up to really expensive, because you need different ways for them to get a little bit more exposure and experience and time with you and trying the service out to see if it's something that they ultimately want to commit to long term. It's one of the biggest things, hardest things to overcome in a sales process, is go from like, okay, I'm consuming your free content, I'm in your free group, and I'm getting all this information, but now you're asking me thousands of dollars to commit to 6 to 12 months of working with you. And that's a big jump. There's so many doubts that I have in my mind, not just about like you and your program, but about myself. And so having some smaller exposure, but one that they actually, trialability doesn't necessarily mean that it's not paid. It doesn't have to be free, right? But it's just a shorter term exposure to what you ultimately do as your main thing, to allow people to have some more certainty inside of their decision. The observability, this is pretty straightforward, but it's just showing other people doing it. So I think this is what coaches miss out on the most is, most people don't have a concept of what online coaching looks like. What does that experience actually look and feel like? And so can we get them to observe and experience it before they actually commit to doing something? And this is where the testimonials come in, the case studies, but it's also like showing the behind the scenes of what you do as a coach and what you do for your clients. That really helps for people to conceptualize this, right? Because there's a lot of people that if they don't really know what it looks like, right? Like, oh, hire me as a coach. What does that mean, right? Like, what do we do? How do I actually get help? There's a lot of question marks around it. So showing people what it actually looks like to get coaching from you can be really powerful. Then this is what I dropped in the group earlier, which is the TIMER acronym, right? Easy to remember. It's just the TIMER. These are the 5 reasons that people will ultimately buy something from you. So when it comes to time, it's either they'll buy to save time or get more time for other things, right? Or we can also take the lens of like doing something faster or with less time to get the result, right? So that's the time component. So an example for like fitness and nutrition is the obvious one is get this result in less time. But at some point, the claims become unbelievable and not realistic. And so that's where that angle stops to work, because everybody's just going like, lose 30 pounds in 30 minutes, right? Like that's just, nobody believes that to be true. So you can only condense the time that it takes to get a certain result so much. So then the other things that help with this is like, it's basically like, spend less of your day-to-day time to get that same result, right? So instead of being in the gym for an hour a day, 5 days a week, can you do it in an hour a day, 3 days a week, right? That would be taking the angle of time. The caveat before continuing on, you do not have to sell to all of these things. You can pick one and really focus on it. But just understanding when you're having conversations with people, they may be looking for a different thing or a reason why they might buy. But it's certainly, it might even be useful to just pick one and to focus on that for the majority of your marketing efforts as the reason that people would ultimately buy from you. You don't have to solve all of them inside of what you do. The next one would be identity. Does it align with and solidify my identity, right? So again, back to the example earlier, if I am a vegan, your coaching program is for vegans, and it speaks to creating, like one program I saw recently was like jacked vegans, right? Specific person that is a vegan that wants to be jacked, that speaks to the identity that they want to step into. And so because of that, they would purchase that program to get closer to being that jacked vegan identity, right? Another great example is like Fit Dad, right? So if I desire to identify and be a fit dad, then buying a program that allows me to do that is in support of my identity. So I'm buying based on that, buying on stepping into, solidifying, aligning with either my current identity or the one that I want to or aspire to be. Money is the most straightforward one. This one is harder to sell for fitness and nutrition coaches. For myself, obviously being a business coach, this is the one that makes the most sense most of the time. It's kind of the easiest to position and sell around. You give me X and you'll be able to get X out. But it's not just about make money. That's the easiest one and usually the most desirable, but you can take the frame of saving money, right? This is how this program will ultimately save you tens of thousands of dollars in medical expenses, in surgeries, in whatever else might be inside of that. That's not the typical frame that works the best or people take for fitness and nutrition, but you could have nuances of that in your sales process. The energy is not just about like get more energy, but it's also how easy is this going to be? Like, so how much energy am I going to have to put into this to get the result that I desire? So this is why so much of marketing, as you see, is how do we position this as like basically like do nothing, get the result, and that's why I sell like crazy, which is why all of the pills and shots and different things, that's why they make billions of dollars, because it's basically telling people do nothing and get the result that you want. Take this pill, take this shot, get the result. That's it. The least amount of energy and effort that you have to put in. And that's why it's desirable for people. Not necessarily that extreme is a good thing, but that's why people are interested in it. That's why they buy that. So if you can say get this result with as little energy as possible, that becomes a reason that they might buy. Or the other frame of this is like if we want to position it as like giving people back energy, like getting more energy through this process. That is one angle. And then the last one is the reputation. Does it increase my status amongst, usually most importantly, your peers? Like the people that you want to look good in front of and be respected in front of, which again, using some of those other examples, if you are a vegan, you you align with that as a person, that's who you kind of identify as, then you see this in many people when it comes to like status and reputation. They like to wear these things kind of on their sleeves. So, if someone is a vegan, it's likely that you would find out pretty quickly in conversation with them, because there's going to be some display of wanting you to know that that's who they are and how they identify. But it's similar in all things. Like, that's not to bash on, vegans per se, but like it's similar in parents, right? We very quickly will bring a conversation back to the fact that we are parents and that we have kids and talking about our kids, right? That's very quick to come up in any conversation that we're having. And typically, or we will look to buy or do things to align with or increase our status amongst our peers in this area of our life, right? So it's also one of the reasons that like people won't buy, because potentially they have a peer group that doesn't value those things. So in the fitness and nutrition space, if you're a parent that desires to get fit, but all the other parents that you hang out with are not fit and they constantly give you a hard time for wanting to be fit, well then this might actually be a reason that you don't buy, because your reputation amongst them will be hurt if you change. And you hear that many times in relationships, right? Where one partner doesn't really support the transformation. And so it's really hard for them to purchase and say yes, because that's hurting their reputation with their partner, which is obviously something like a thing that they care about, having that, reputation with their significant other. So it's a big one. A lot of people buy on status and reputation amongst their peers and do things out of that, out of what they view other people will think about their decision to make this change. So if you can align buying with an increase in status and reputation amongst the people that they care most about, it's a really powerful trigger to get them to buy. So yeah, hopefully this helps. It's actually turned out to be way longer than I thought it was going to be, but I think it's useful to cover these things again. And anytime that you are looking to create any marketing message, which is ultimately content that we're putting out there, look back at these and start to think like, am I addressing these in the content that I'm putting out? And addressing the false beliefs that my audience has as the reasons they won't ultimately take the action or buy from me. And if we don't knock these down again and again and again and again over time, that's where we get in this cycle of potentially creating and people consuming but not actually doing anything with it. So return to these whenever you are creating content, and it'll really help to make things that are more powerful for your audience.